ladies and gentlemen, hope you will be fine. Your mind is a battleground, and if you don't take control of it, something else will. The way you think determines the way you live. If your thoughts are poison, if they're filled with resentment, fear, and self-doubt, then your actions will reflect that. You'll hesitate when you should move forward. You'll retreat when you should stand your ground. You'll convince yourself that failure is inevitable before you've even tried, and worst of all, you'll justify it. You'll tell yourself that the world is cruel, that success is for other people, that you were never meant to achieve anything meaningful. But none of that is true. It's just the story your negativity tells you to keep you weak. The problem with negative thinking is that it isn't just a bad habit, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You tell yourself you're not good enough, and so you don't try. You tell yourself you can't win, and so you don't fight. And then when nothing changes, you say, see, I was right. But you weren't right, you just never gave yourself a chance. You let your own mind become your worst enemy. You let it convince you that failure was certain, that effort was pointless, that you were destined to lose. But that isn't destiny. That's surrender. And you don't get to complain about the outcome if you never entered the fight in the first place. Your thoughts shape your perception, and your perception shapes your reality. If you train yourself to look for disaster, you'll find it. If you assume people are against you, you'll interpret every action as an attack. If you focus only on what's missing, you'll never see what you have. But the opposite is also true. If you focus on opportunity, you'll start to see doors where you once saw walls. If you choose to believe that your actions matter, you'll start acting like they do. And if you refuse to let negativity dictate your choices, you'll begin to realize just how much control you actually have. This doesn't mean lying to yourself. It doesn't mean pretending life is easy or that bad things don't happen. It means refusing to be crushed by your own cynicism. It means acknowledging the struggle but choosing to engage with it instead of running from it. It means recognizing your pain without letting it define you. Because if you let negativity rule your mind, you become its servant. You surrender your power, and the more you surrender, the harder it is to get it back. You need to kill your negative thinking before it kills you. Not all at once, not in some grand, dramatic moment, but in small, deliberate steps. You do it by watching your thoughts like a predator watches its prey. You catch yourself when you start spiraling into self-pity, when you assume the worst, when you tear yourself down before anyone else gets the chance. And then, instead of feeding those thoughts, you challenge them, you demand proof. You ask, is this true? Or is this just my fear talking? And more often than not, you'll find that your negativity has no real evidence. It's just a habit one you've practiced for so long that it feels like reality. You change your thinking by forcing yourself to act in spite of it. You feel worthless? Do something worthwhile. You feel like a failure? Get up and try again. You feel like nothing will ever improve? Improve something small right now. You don't wait until you feel positive before you take action. You take action, and then the positivity follows. You break the cycle by refusing to let your emotions dictate your behavior. And the more you do this, the more control you regain, the more power you reclaim, the more your mind becomes your ally instead of your enemy. Your thoughts can either be a weapon you use against yourself or a tool you use to build something better. And the choice, no matter how impossible it feels, is always yours. Negative thinking is a self-fulfilling prophecy because it shapes your actions, your perceptions, and ultimately your outcomes. When you allow negativity to dominate your mind, you begin to see the world as a hostile, unforgiving place. You assume the worst about your future, about other people, and about yourself. And the problem with that mindset is that it subtly but powerfully alters the way you engage with reality. You hesitate when you should act. You withdraw when you should push forward. You assume defeat before you've even started. And when the inevitable failure comes, you say, see, I knew this would happen. But it didn't happen because it was inevitable. It happened because you made it happen. The mind is an incredibly powerful filter. It doesn't just passively receive information, it actively selects what it notices. If you're constantly telling yourself that you're a failure, your brain will look for every possible piece of evidence to confirm that belief. It will highlight every mistake, magnify every shortcoming, and ignore every success. It's not that you aren't succeeding at anything, it's that your brain refuses to acknowledge it. And once you're caught in that trap, you start behaving in ways that reinforce your own worst fears. If you believe people don't like you, you'll act defensive or withdrawn. If you believe you'll never succeed, you won't put in the effort. If you believe the world is unfair, You won't take responsibility for improving your situation. And the more you behave that way, the more real those beliefs become. The worst part is that negative thinking masquerades as intelligence. People think that being cynical means being realistic, that expecting the worst is a form of wisdom. But it's not wisdom, it's an excuse to avoid risk, to justify inaction, to stay in a place that feels familiar, even if it's miserable. It's the illusion of control. Because if you assume everything will go wrong, at least you won't be surprised, right? But that kind of thinking doesn't protect you, it traps you. It keeps you small. It keeps you weak. It keeps you stuck. The only way out is to recognize the lie, to realize that your thoughts are shaping your reality far more than reality is shaping your thoughts. You have to challenge the negativity, to refuse to let it dictate your actions. Because the truth is, the way you think determines the way you live. And if you don't change the story you tell yourself, you will spend your entire life proving yourself right. Your perception is not just a passive recording of reality, it's an active filter that determines what you see, what you focus on, and ultimately, how you live. The world is filled with complexity, with infinite details, opportunities, and dangers, but you don't perceive all of it. You only see what your mind is trained to recognize. If you believe that life is nothing but suffering, cruelty, and disappointment, then your brain will unconsciously seek out evidence to confirm that belief. You will notice every failure, every injustice, every moment of pain, and you will ignore the opportunities, the kindness, and the victories because they don't fit the story you're telling yourself. The problem with this is that your perception isn't just a reflection of the world, it actively shapes the way you engage with it. If you believe people are untrustworthy, you will treat them with suspicion. If you believe you are destined to fail, you will hesitate when opportunities arise. If you believe your actions don't matter, you won't put in the effort to improve your life. And the irony is that this very way of thinking causes the reality you feared to manifest. People who are treated with distrust become defensive. Opportunities that are ignored disappear. A lack of effort guarantees failure. Your perception becomes your reality not because the world is inherently that way, but because you made it that way through your actions and expectations. The opposite is also true. If you choose to believe that effort leads to improvement, then you will take action even when things seem uncertain. If you choose to believe that people are capable of goodness, then you will treat them in a way that encourages trust and cooperation. If you choose to believe that your thoughts and behaviors shape your future, then you will act with greater discipline and purpose. And over time, those beliefs become self-reinforcing. You see progress where you once saw obstacles. You see growth where you once saw stagnation. You see a future where you once saw despair. Your mind is the lens through which you experience life, and if that lens is distorted, everything you see will be warped by negativity and fear. But if you take responsibility for your perception, if you consciously choose to view the world in a way that empowers you rather than weakens you, then you begin to shape a reality that is not just something to endure, but something worth striving for. Negativity is not just a bad habit, it's a form of surrender. Every time you allow negative thoughts to dominate your mind, you are handing over your power to something that exists only in your perception. You're giving control of your life to doubt, fear, and resentment, and in doing so, you are actively making yourself weaker. Because when you convince yourself that nothing will improve, that you are incapable, that the world is rigged against you, you stop trying. And the moment you stop trying, you have already lost. Negativity is insidious because it disguises itself as wisdom. People convince themselves that being negative means being realistic, that expecting the worst is a form of intelligence. But that's a lie. Negativity doesn't make you stronger, it makes you passive. It gives you an excuse to avoid responsibility. If you believe nothing can be changed, then you don't have to put in the effort to change it. If you believe success is impossible, then you don't have to take risks. And if you believe that suffering is all there is, then you can justify doing nothing to improve your circumstances. Negativity allows you to sit back and say, "It's not my fault," while your life crumbles around you. The real danger of negativity is that it rewires your mind to see only obstacles and never solutions. If you constantly tell yourself that you're incapable, that you're unworthy, that you're doomed to fail, then you will begin to act as if those things are true. You will hesitate when you should take action. You will withdraw when you should push forward. You will sabotage your own potential before the world even has the chance to challenge you. And when you inevitably fail, you will use it as proof that your negativity was justified, never realizing that it was the very thing that created the failure in the first place. Taking back your power means rejecting the easy comfort of negativity. It means standing up and acknowledging that, yes, life is difficult, and yes, suffering is real, but you are not powerless in the face of it. It means training your mind to focus on what can be done instead of what can't. It means refusing to let fear dictate your choices, because the moment you let negativity decide how you act, you have already surrendered. But the moment you take responsibility for your thoughts, you begin to reclaim control not just over your mind, but over your entire life. The ability to challenge negative thoughts is not merely an exercise in positive thinking. It is a fundamental necessity for the development of a resilient and functional individual. Human beings are deeply susceptible to the tyranny of their own minds, often allowing destructive thought patterns to dictate their perceptions, actions, and even their very sense of self. If one does not actively challenge these thoughts, one risks becoming a prisoner of their own worst assumptions, spiraling downward into bitterness, resentment, and self-destruction. The human brain, as a product of millions of years of evolution, is predisposed to detect threats. This is not an arbitrary flaw, it is an adaptation designed to ensure survival. However, the same mechanism that kept our ancestors alert to predators and rival tribes now manifests in a far more insidious way through an overactive, self-critical voice that exaggerates failures, amplifies fears, and undermines confidence. Left unchecked, this voice becomes a tyrant, dictating the narrative of one's life in a manner that is both inaccurate and harmful. To challenge negative thoughts is, therefore, an act of defiance against an internal oppressor. It requires the courage to confront one's assumptions and subject them to rigorous scrutiny. Are these thoughts true? What evidence supports them? Would you speak to a friend the way you speak to yourself? These are not trivial questions. They are the very tools by which one wrests control from the unconscious forces that seek to dominate and degrade. There is a moral responsibility in this process. A person crippled by negative thoughts is a person who cannot properly engage with the world. If you believe yourself to be worthless, incapable, or doomed to failure, then you are less likely to act in ways that contribute positively to yourself, your family, and your community. This is not merely an individual problem, it is a societal one. A population plagued by unchallenged negative thoughts is a population that will suffer from widespread apathy, nihilism, and despair. The responsibility to challenge negative thoughts extends beyond oneself. It is an obligation to the world, to the very structure of being itself. You have a duty to stand up to the chaos within you, to carve order from it, and to act as a force for good. And that begins with the simple but profound act of refusing to believe everything your mind tells you without question. Action as the antidote to negativity. Negativity is a force of paralysis. It manifests in self-doubt, fear, resentment, and despair. It tells you that things are meaningless, that you are incapable, that nothing will ever improve. It is a voice of nihilism, whispering that existence itself is suffering and that your efforts are futile. And here's the problem: you listen, you entertain these thoughts as though they are wise advisors rather than malevolent tyrants. And when you listen long enough, you fail to act. But action, real, deliberate action, destroys negativity at its root. Why? Because action is a demonstration of belief, a proof of intent, a restructuring of the world in defiance of despair. It is the mechanism by which you impose order on chaos. The moment you act, you refute the lie that you are powerless. A person trapped in a state of hopelessness often believes they have no choices. They say, "Why bother?" Nothing will change, but the act of moving forward, however small the step, obliterates that illusion. You clean your room, you reclaim a fragment of your world from disorder. You confront a fear, you diminish its power over you. You pursue a goal, you assert your ability to shape the future. In each case, action provides direct, irrefutable evidence that your mind's most cynical narratives are false. Action is also deeply tied to meaning. Meaning is not something you passively receive. It is something you earn through struggle and engagement with reality. A person who sits in darkness, ruminating endlessly on their suffering, will not stumble upon meaning. But the person who lifts their burden and moves forward even when they don't feel like it discovers through action that their suffering has purpose. This is why courage is essential. Action often requires movement into the unknown, which is terrifying. But what is the alternative? To sit in stasis, to wallow in the certainty of suffering, to allow negativity to fester unchecked. That is no alternative at all. The only way forward is to act to stand up straight, set your shoulders back, and move towards something, anything, that represents improvement. So, if negativity dominates your mind, act. Do something, however small, that reasserts your presence in the world. Because in the battle between despair and purpose, action is the weapon that ensures victory. Reclaiming power, the necessity of action and perception. Negativity is a thief. It steals your strength, your vision, your potential. It convinces you that you are powerless when, in fact, you are merely untested. It whispers that the world is against you, that failure is inevitable, that suffering is meaningless. And the more you accept this narrative, the more it shapes your reality, because perception is not just observation, it is creation. If you see the world as hostile and yourself as weak, then that is precisely the world you will inhabit. But you are not powerless. You are not doomed to be a victim of your own thoughts. The mind is a battlefield, and every moment presents a choice: surrender to despair or fight back with truth and action. The first and most vital step in reclaiming your life is to challenge the negative thoughts that poison it. Are they true? Or are they simply the easiest, most familiar patterns you've allowed to take root? If you do not interrogate these thoughts, they will govern you, and worse, they will become your reality. Negativity is not just a passive force, it is an active surrender. It hands over your agency to chaos, convinces you that you have no responsibility, no control, no influence over the world. But that is a lie. The antidote is action. The only way to destroy negativity is to move toward order, toward purpose, toward something meaningful. You may not feel ready. You may not have all the answers. But hesitation only strengthens the adversary. Movement is the only way forward. And make no mistake, negative thinking is a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you believe you are incapable, you will act accordingly. If you believe you are worthless, you will find endless evidence to confirm it. But the opposite is also true. If you stand up, set your shoulders back, and act as though your choices matter, then you will prove over and over again that they do. So refuse to be ruled by despair. Challenge your assumptions. Recognize that the way you see the world shapes the world. And most importantly, act. Because in the fight against negativity, action is the only force that can turn the tide. You are not weak. You are not hopeless. You are simply unawakened to your own strength. And the moment you move toward it, you leave despair behind forever.